You think success is about working harder, waking up earlier, pushing yourself to exhaustion. But the truth is, most people already do that and still remain stuck. There's a hidden code running inside you right now. You can't see it, but it dictates how far you go, how much you endure, and whether you rise when everything tries to push you down. And unless you reprogram it, it's running your life on autopilot. This code decides whether you give up when things get difficult or whether you find that second wind when others are already walking away. It's not about motivation. It's not about discipline alone. It's the internal architecture of who you are, built from decisions you don't even notice you're making. Stephen Covey always taught that your results don't come from the surface actions you take, but from the unseen principles that drive them. The people you call unstoppable, they've learned to rewrite those principles line by line until failure is no longer an option in their identity. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We'll uncover the patterns that make you hesitate, the beliefs that quietly sabotage you, and the precise shifts that will turn you into someone who doesn't just survive pressure, but thrives because of it. If you stay until the end, you'll walk away with a framework that doesn't fade after a week. It will stay with you in every decision, every challenge, every morning you wake up, until being unstoppable isn't something you aim for. It's simply who you are. So let's start decoding. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow, and before your feet touch the floor, you already know how the day will unfold. Not because you've memorized a plan, but because you've trained yourself to respond the same way every time in the moments that matter most. There's no inner debate. No, let's see how I feel. Just action, swift, certain, grounded in who you've decided to be. This is one of the most powerful foundations of the hidden code. The removal of hesitation between decision and action. The people you see as unstoppable aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest dreams. They're the ones who have erased the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. I've always believed that private victories come before public victories. What you choose in the quiet moments, when no one's watching, shapes the kind of person who will show up when the stakes are high. The truth is, most people waste these private moments. They make micro-compromises that seem harmless at the time. Skipping a workout because they're too tired, avoiding a call they know they should make because it's not the right moment. Those aren't small decisions. They're confirmations of an identity that will keep repeating itself tomorrow. You can end that pattern by deciding in advance how you will act in specific situations. Before the test comes, the answer is already written. If someone questions your work, you've already chosen to respond with calm clarity. If your plans fall apart, you've already chosen to adapt without losing your forward motion. That's how you strip uncertainty out of your own behavior, by preloading the decision before life forces you to make it. Think about it. You walk into a meeting already knowing your tone, your posture, your level of preparation. You wake up already knowing how you'll treat your body, your mind, your time. It's not arrogance, it's readiness. The same readiness a pilot feels before takeoff. Not because the flight will be easy, but because every possible scenario has been rehearsed. This kind of preparation doesn't turn you into a machine. It turns you into someone who can think clearly when pressure mounts. You've practiced enough in your mind that the best version of you becomes the default. And every time you follow through, the lines of that code are carved deeper until acting with consistency is an effort. It's instinct. The mistake people make is waiting for the right emotional state before acting. But if you've decided in advance, you don't have to feel like doing it. You simply do it because that's who you are. Your actions stop depending on motivation and start flowing from identity. Think about the last time you truly felt unstoppable. Was it because everything went your way, or because you stayed the course when nothing did? That's the proof. Power comes from holding the line when your emotions beg you to let go. Imagine making that your baseline, not the exception. Start small. Identify one area of your life where you hesitate, stall, or negotiate with yourself. Decide now, before it happens again, exactly how you will act next time. And when that moment comes, follow through without hesitation. Do it once, then again and again. Soon, Your mind stops asking, will I? And starts believing I will. What happens next is subtle, but life-changing. You start trusting yourself. Not in theory, but in practice. You know you can count on you. And when that trust locks into place, it's almost impossible for the outside world to knock you off course. Removing hesitation isn't about becoming perfect. It's about eliminating the wasted time between knowing and doing. Once you've closed that gap, you stop leaking energy on indecision and start using it to build momentum. And momentum, once it's rolling, has a way of pulling you toward bigger challenges. Because here's the thing, when you know exactly how you'll act no matter what happens, you stop fearing what could go wrong. You start leaning into pressure instead of avoiding it. You stop waiting for perfect timing because you've already chosen the person you'll be when the moment arrives. That's when the hidden code begins to rewrite itself. Because here's the turning point that separates those who dream from those who build. When you remove the pause between knowing and doing, every choice becomes a brick laid exactly where it needs to be. And as those bricks stack higher, going back to who you were is no longer an option. That's when real transformation starts to take shape, and with it comes a different kind of challenge, one that will demand more than speed. There's a second layer to this hidden code, and facing it requires a kind of honesty most people avoid. It's the environment you've built around yourself. You might believe you're steering your own actions, but you'd be surprised at how much your surroundings are steering you instead. The spaces you spend your time in, the people whose voices echo in your mind, the content you let in, they're all either reinforcing the person you're becoming or dragging you back to the person you're trying to leave behind. There's no middle ground. I learned long ago that you cannot plant yourself in unhealthy soil and expect to grow strong roots. Even the strongest principles erode if they're constantly under siege by the wrong influences. You may have the best intentions, but if every signal around you is pulling you off course, you will eventually drift. Look closely at where you live, work, and think. Do those spaces sharpen your focus or scatter it? And what about the people around you? Do they ignite your ambition or subtly make you feel foolish for wanting more? Every interaction either feeds your growth or stars it. Sometimes, changing this isn't about cutting people out completely. It's about redefining the rules of engagement. You stop bringing your biggest goals into conversations with those who can't understand them. You limit time and places that trigger old habits. You carve out environments, physical, mental, emotional, where the person you're becoming feels at home. You can't rise above your surroundings unless you shape them to support the climb. And shaping them isn't just about removing the negative. It's about deliberately planting the positive. The books in reach on your desk, the first voice you hear in the morning, the image that greets you when you wake up, these aren't background details. They are votes for the identity you're stepping into. Here's the trap. You can have a strong internal code, but if your external world keeps feeding the old one, eventually it will take over. Protecting your progress means surrounding yourself with cues that make your new behaviors feel like the most natural thing in the world. At first, it's uncomfortable. You'll see just how much you've tolerated without realizing it. You'll notice how your preferences are often just habits disguised as personality. Most people give up here. They can't bear to leave behind the familiarity, even when it's costing them their future. Les choses différentes. I redesigned one small corner at a time. My desk became a launch pad, not a dumping ground. Mornings were filled with voices that challenged me, not dulled me. Conversations shifted from gossip and complaint to vision and accountability. Every change was another line of code rewritten until the system began running differently on its own. And then something shifted. I wasn't forcing myself to resist temptation anymore. The environment itself became my ally, pulling me forward instead of holding me back. The path of least resistance finally lined up with the path I want to take. That's when momentum became stable. It no longer depended on a perfect mood or unlimited willpower. Even on the hard days, the structures around me kept me from slipping too far. The system caught me before I could fall. If you want to be unstoppable, stop letting your environment be a random collection of habits, people, and places. Start treating it like a custom-designed arena built for your growth. When the air you breathe, the voices you hear, and the space you move in are all aligned with the person you're becoming, you don't just make progress, you accelerate it. And this is where you realize the game isn't purely internal. What surrounds you shapes what's inside you, day after day. Adjust the setting and the code within your response. And when that setting begins to align everything in your favor, the next shift won't just be deeper, it will be impossible to ignore. There's a point where discipline and environment aren't enough on their own. You can act with precision and design the perfect surroundings, but if the image you hold of yourself doesn't change, the old version of you will always find a way back in. This is the deeper layer most people never touch, the identity that quietly runs the code in the background. You can force yourself into new actions for a while, but if deep down you still see yourself as inconsistent, undisciplined, or the kind of person who never finishes, your subconscious will work tirelessly to prove that image right. Every missed opportunity, every small failure, will feel like confirmation of who you secretly believe you are. I've seen people build incredible momentum only to sabotage it because their results didn't match their self-image. They could handle the work, but not the person they saw in the mirror. And the truth is, you can't outperform the way you define yourself for very long. If the identity stays the same, the code never truly changes. That's why I stopped focusing only on what I was doing and started paying attention to who I was becoming. I began to ask myself, if I were already the kind of person I want to be, how would I handle this exact moment? And then I'd act from that place, not from who I'd been, but from the future version I was stepping into. At first, it felt like pretending. But over time, every repetition made it feel more natural until it no longer felt like acting. It felt like remembering. Here's what most don't understand. Identity is reinforced in small, unremarkable moments. When you show up on time for a meeting you could have easily been late for. When you choose to keep your word to yourself, even when nobody else will know. When you stand by your values in conversations where it would be easier to stay quiet. These are the votes you cast for the person you are becoming. The process isn't about creating a completely different self overnight. It's about upgrading the internal script line by line. You start by noticing when your current identity is speaking. Maybe it's the voice that says, "You've never been consistent, so you probably won't keep this up." Or, "You always mess up at this stage." When that voice shows up, you interrupt it with a decision that proves it wrong. Not with words, but with action. Soon, the lines of the old code get weaker and the new ones get stronger. And there's a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when the balance tips. You realize you're no longer trying to be this person. You simply are. The decisions you once had to force now happen without thinking. And here's where it gets powerful. Once your identity aligns with your actions and your environment, momentum stops being fragile. You no longer need to hype yourself up every morning because the choices you want to make are simply the choices that feel natural. They match who you are. Of course, this isn't a one-time switch. Identity can drift if you stop reinforcing it. The world will test you, circumstances will change, and old versions of yourself will try to resurface. But the difference now is that you have a reference point. You know what it feels like to live in alignment. And once you've experienced that, going back feels impossible. There will be days when you can feel the pull of your old patterns, tempting you to respond in the ways you once did. Those are not setbacks, they're checkpoints. Each one is a chance to confirm that the new version of you isn't fragile, that it holds under pressure. And each time you pass one of those tests, the identity you're building becomes even more anchored. This is why it's essential to keep feeding the new version, even in ways that feel small. A 5-minute act of discipline reinforces your code just as much as a major breakthrough. A choice made quietly, without applause, can have more weight than a public victory. Over time, these choices accumulate into a kind of internal certainty, one that doesn't shout, but that never leaves. And as that certainty grows, you notice something else. Opportunities you once thought were out of reach start to feel within range. Challenges that used to intimidate you now feel like invitations. You're no longer just capable of handling them. You're drawn to them because they match the story you now tell about yourself. The longer you live from this place, the less you have to force change. It begins to happen on its own. Your habits shift because they're aligned with who you are. Your relationships evolve because you no longer fit into the same patterns. Even the way you speak changes because your words come from a deeper conviction. And when all of that begins to align, it stops feeling like you're chasing a goal and starts feeling like you're becoming the person you were meant to be from the start. There's no clear finish line, no moment where the work is done, just a steady evolution into a version of yourself that can't be shaken by circumstance. The work you've done up to this point lays a foundation that's stronger than most will ever build. And on a foundation like that, there's room to attempt things most people never dare to try. Risks that carry more weight, more uncertainty, but also more reward. There comes a stage in this transformation where the safety of consistency can quietly turn into a limitation. You've built discipline, shaped your environment, rewritten your identity, and now you're steady, reliable, predictable. That's a strength, but it can also become a cage if you let it. Because the very stability you've worked so hard to create can start to keep you from stepping into the unknown where the next level of growth lies. Many people stop here without realizing it. They're no longer struggling, but they're not truly advancing either. They've mastered the game they were playing, and now they're just running the same laps on a track they know by heart. Comfort disguised as progress. It feels good, but it's not the same as expansion. I learned that the only way to keep evolving was to deliberately place myself in situations that force me to stretch. Not recklessly, but with intention. Risk isn't the opposite of discipline. It's the test that keeps discipline alive. Without new challenges, even the strongest code can grow stale, repeating the same commands without producing anything new. This doesn't mean you throw yourself into chaos for the sake of excitement. It means you choose goals that feel slightly beyond your current capacity, situations that require you to adapt faster, think sharper, or hold your composure longer than before. You lean into projects that make your pulse quicken, not because you're afraid, but because you know you're about to grow. Sometimes the leap is external, taking on a responsibility you've never handled, moving into an arena where the stakes are higher. Other times, it's internal. Having the conversation you've been avoiding, dismantling a belief you've carried for years, breaking a habit that feels like part of your personality. Either way, it's the willingness to risk the comfort you've built in order to reach the edge of your current limits. I used to think that once I reached a certain level of stability, I'd be done taking risks. But I realized that the most resilient people I've ever met didn't just maintain what they had. They kept putting themselves in rooms, situations, and commitments where they could fail. Not because they enjoyed the possibility of failure, but because they understood that it was the only way to keep expanding. What makes this work is the foundation you've already built. Before, taking a risk might have thrown you off completely. Now, the discipline, environment, and identity you've forged act like a safety net. You can stretch farther without losing yourself. You can face uncertainty without crumbling. That's the difference between reckless risk and strategic risk. And here's something else. The moment you commit to a new challenge, your code starts to adjust. You begin thinking differently, anticipating differently, carrying yourself differently, because the new situation demands it. You may not see it day by day, but each choice you make under pressure rewrites the way you operate when you return to the familiar. This is where many people feel the most alive, not in the moments of ease, but in the moments when everything they've built is being tested in real time. The heartbeat is faster, the mind sharper, the senses more alert. It's in those moments that you realize you've been preparing for this all along. Every early morning, every hard choice, every quiet victory was a rehearsal for the moment you need to hold your ground here. The real growth comes when you stop avoiding these moments and start seeking them out. Not recklessly, not all at once, but steadily and with purpose. The more you do it, the less foreign it feels. Risk stops being something you take and start being something you live with, a constant companion on the road to your fullest potential. And yes, there will be times when you miscalculate. You'll take on something that stretches you further than you planned. You'll stumble, maybe even fall hard. But here's the truth. Falling at this stage doesn't destroy you. It teaches you. Because your foundation catches you. And from there, you rebuild stronger with new data, new awareness, and a deeper sense of what you're capable of. If you resist risk, you protect what you have, but limit what you can become. If you embrace it strategically, you keep your code alive, evolving, and ready for challenges you can't yet see. That's what keeps you from plateauing, from becoming a master of a game that no longer pushes you. Growth lives in the tension between stability and uncertainty. Too much of one, and you collapse. Too much of the other, and you never expand. The art is in holding both at once, grounded in who you are while leaning into what you're not yet. That balance is where the next evolution happens. The next phase isn't about adding more rules or creating another layer of structure. It's about learning to operate in a way that feels effortless, even when the work is heavy. This is where mastery starts to take shape. Not the kind of mastery that means you know everything, but the kind that means you can execute under pressure without draining all your energy in the process. Most people think being unstoppable means pushing at maximum intensity all the time, but that's not sustainable. The reality is that the best performers in any field know when to push, when to hold, and when to recover without losing momentum. They've learned the rhythm of performance, how to keep moving forward without burning themselves out. I had to unlearn the belief that rest was a sign of weakness. For years, I equated slowing down with falling behind. But what I discovered is that strategic recovery is part of the code. It's what allows you to stay in the game long enough to win. Without it, even the most disciplined person eventually breaks. Recovery isn't just physical, it's mental and emotional too. It's the ability to step back from a problem before you lose perspective. It's taking a few hours away from the noise so you can return with clarity. It's protecting your energy so that when it's time to perform, you're sharp instead of scattered. The mistake people make is thinking they'll recover later after they've reached the next milestone. But if you only rest once you've hit the wall, you've already lost time and effectiveness. The smarter approach is to build recovery into your process so you never hit that wall in the first place. This means paying attention to your signals before they become emergencies. When focus starts to fade, you take a brief reset before you force errors. When your conversations start to feel reactive, you pause to realign before tension builds. When your body signals fatigue, you adjust the pace before it becomes injury. At first, this feels counterintuitive. It feels like slowing down. But what actually happens is that your overall output increases. You start performing at a consistently high level instead of in unpredictable bursts. You stop relying on adrenaline to get things done and start relying on systems and awareness. I think of it like breathing. You can hold your breath and push through for a while, but eventually you have to stop and gasp for air. That cycle is exhausting. Instead, you learn to breathe while you move, finding a pace that keeps you steady even during long stretches of pressure. The most unstoppable people are not the ones sprinting the hardest in short bursts. They're the ones who can keep moving at a strong, steady pace for as long as the journey requires. That's what makes them outlast the competition. That's what allows them to show up again and again, still sharp, still ready. And here's the hidden benefit. When you master recovery as part of your rhythm, you gain the ability to make better decisions under stress. You can see more clearly because you're not constantly operating in survival mode. You respond instead of react. You anticipate instead of being blindsided. This kind of mastery also changes how others see you. People begin to trust your consistency. They know you won't crumble under pressure, but they also know you won't overextend and burn out. You become the person who is dependable in both crisis and calm. Integrating this into your code doesn't happen overnight. It requires paying attention to the moments when you feel most effective and reverse engineering what got you there. It's asking yourself not just what did I do, but what state was I in when I did it? And then learning to recreate that state deliberately. Eventually, you stop thinking about recovery as something separate from performance. It becomes part of the same process. Just as an athlete alternates between training and rest to improve, you alternate between output and renewal to sustain your growth. It's not a retreat from the work. It's what keeps you in the work for the long run. And when you reach this point, something shifts. You realize you no longer fear the size of the challenge ahead, because you know you can sustain the effort it will require. You're not guessing whether you'll have enough energy, focus, or resilience. You've built the rhythm that ensures you will. That's when you stop worrying about making it and start focusing entirely on how far you can go. The game changes because you're no longer playing to survive, you're playing to expand. And the further you go, the more you understand that the real secret to being unstoppable isn't about pushing harder. It's about staying in the game long enough to see what's possible when you never quit. There's a moment in this process when the game stops being about fixing weaknesses and starts being about amplifying strengths. In the beginning, you spend so much energy patching the gaps: discipline, environment, identity, the ability to take risks, the rhythm of recovery, that it's easy to forget that your greatest advantage comes from leaning hard into what you already do exceptionally well. Most people never get here because they're stuck in repair mode. They're always trying to eliminate flaws, believing that perfection is the end goal. But perfection is a moving target. What really changes the game is finding the areas where you can outperform without draining yourself, and making those areas the cornerstone of how you operate. I had to learn this the hard way. For years, I tried to be equally strong in every skill, thinking that was the key to balance. But balance doesn't mean equal. It means effective. It means knowing where your highest returns come from and doubling down on them, even if that means some areas stay at good enough instead of perfect. When you play to your strengths, you not only produce better results, you produce them faster with less friction. You enter a state where effort feels natural, even energizing, because you're working inside your zone of highest competence. And the more time you spend there, the more your confidence compounds. But here's the twist. Amplifying strengths doesn't mean avoiding challenges. It means using your strengths as leverage to take on bigger challenges. It's knowing that if you're exceptional at strategy, you step into roles that demand vision and direction. If you excel at communication, you put yourself in positions where influence matters. You stop hiding your edge and start building with it. This approach also forces you to strip away the distractions that pull you into work that doesn't align with your strengths. You start asking, is this the highest and best use of my energy? If the answer is no, you find ways to delegate, automate, or eliminate it. That single decision, refusing to dilute your best work, can multiply your output in ways that incremental improvement never could. I've seen people transform their results almost overnight by making this shift. They stopped scattering their focus across everything they could do and started channeling it into what they do best. Within weeks, they were producing at a higher level, not because they worked longer hours, but because every hour was spent in the right place. There's another layer to this. When you operate from your strengths consistently, you build a reputation that precedes you. Opportunities start to find you because people know exactly what you bring to the table. You become the go-to person for a specific kind of result, and that focus creates momentum you can't buy with sheer effort alone. Of course, there's a trap here too. If you're not careful, you can become so comfortable in your strengths that you stop evolving. That's why this stage isn't about comfort. It's about amplification with intentional stretch. You keep your strengths as your foundation, but you use them to step into arenas that still push you. It's the difference between playing it safe and playing it smart. I started treating my strengths like a lens. Everything I did had to pass through it. If it sharpened my edge, I said yes. If it dulled it, I reconsidered. That single habit has saved me from countless detours that would have slowed my progress. And it's given me the bandwidth to pour more into the work that moves me forward. Over time, this way of operating changes how you see yourself. You stop thinking of success as something you have to chase and start seeing it as the natural outcome of focusing on your highest value. You realize that being unstoppable isn't just about endurance or discipline. It's about knowing exactly where your power lies and building your entire system around it. And when you reach that point, the path ahead gets clearer. Not easier, never easier, but clearer. You know where to direct your energy. You know what to protect at all costs. And you know that every time you work from that place, you're not just moving forward. You're building something that can stand for years, maybe decades. The challenge then becomes this: how do you protect and multiply what you've built without losing the hunger that got you here in the first place? That's the question that will determine whether your momentum lasts or fades. At some point, everything you've built, your discipline, your environment, your identity, your willingness to take risks, your rhythm of recovery, and your amplified strengths will be tested all at once. It won't happen when you're ready, and it won't wait for the perfect conditions. Life has a way of stacking challenges in ways that expose the smallest cracks. And when that moment comes, you'll find out whether your code holds or collapses. This isn't a warning, it's a reality. Anyone who's played at a high level long enough knows that pressure compounds. A single obstacle can be managed. Two can be handled with effort. But when 3, 4, 5 things hit at the same time, you're forced to operate at the edge of your capacity. That's when you discover whether what you've built is truly part of you, or just a routine you've been following. I faced seasons where everything seemed to shift at once. Opportunities demanding more from me, relationships changing, unexpected setbacks, internal doubts creeping back in. And I realized that the difference between breaking and holding wasn't whether I felt ready. It was whether my foundation was strong enough to absorb the hit. In those moments, you can't afford to reinvent your system on the spot. You have to lean into what's already been ingrained. The habits you've practiced, the mindset you've reinforced, the environment you've shaped, they become your autopilot when your mind is pulled in a dozen directions. You act from instinct, not because you're trying to be strong, but because strength is the only language your system knows. This is also where adaptability becomes non-negotiable. Rigidity breaks under compound pressure. Flexibility bends and returns to shape. If your code is built on unshakable principles but adaptable execution, you can shift your approach without losing your core. You can reroute without losing momentum. One thing I've learned is that these high-pressure moments aren't just tests, they're multipliers. If you can maintain performance when everything is pulling at you, you emerge stronger than before. Not just because you survived, but because you expanded your capacity. What felt impossible before now feels manageable, and your threshold for pressure rises permanently. The temptation during these seasons is to drop back into survival mode, cutting back on everything except the most urgent fires. But that's a mistake. The more you retreat, the more you reinforce the idea that you can only operate at full capacity when conditions are easy. Instead, this is the time to hold your standards. You may adjust the pace, but you keep the quality. You may shift your strategy, but you keep the commitment. There's a calm that comes with this approach. You stop panicking when the weight increases because you've proven to yourself, again and again, that you can carry it. You may not enjoy the discomfort, but you respect what it's doing for you. You know that the version of you on the other side will be more capable than the one standing here now. And perhaps most importantly, you start to see these moments not as threats, but as opportunities to solidify the person you've been becoming. Anyone can look strong when life is easy, but to hold your ground, keep your rhythm, and still push forward when the pressure stacks, that's rare. That's when you know your code is no longer fragile. This shift in perspective changes everything. You stop fearing the big tests because you recognize them as the very thing that cements your transformation. The harder the season, the more deeply the habits and principles become embedded. Every challenge is another layer of reinforcement. And when you've seen yourself operate at that level, it changes the way you move in every other area. You don't just bounce back after difficulty, you expand. You start carrying the confidence of someone who knows they can handle whatever comes next. Not because they're invincible, but because they're prepared to adapt without losing themselves. When you reach this point, the question is no longer, can I handle it? But what will this shape me into? The pressure stops feeling like an interruption and starts feeling like part of the process. You move through it with a quiet certainty that every weight you carry is also building you, layer by layer, into someone who doesn't just withstand the storm, but emerges from it stronger than when it began. Every journey reaches a point where the pursuit stops being about the milestones and starts being about the person you become along the way. When you look back, the wins matter, but what matters more is who you had to be to earn them. The decisions you made when no one was watching. The moments you held the line when everything around you suggested you should let go. The times you carried yourself through when it would have been easier to fall back. If you've been listening closely, you already know that being unstoppable isn't about force alone. It's about alignment. Discipline without direction burns you out. Environment without intention keeps you comfortable but stagnant. Identity without reinforcement fades under pressure. Risk without a safety net can break you, while recovery without forward motion leaves you stuck. Strengths without challenge dull over time, and performance without adaptability shatters when a load multiplies. What makes the code complete is how all of these elements work together, each one feeding the others, each one protecting the whole. The more integrated they become, the less effort you waste fighting yourself. You stop spending energy negotiating your own decisions, because you've already decided who you are and how you move through the world. And then something shifts. Life doesn't necessarily get easier, but you start moving through it with a different kind of certainty. You don't hesitate when opportunity knocks. You don't crumble when resistance rises. You don't overthink whether you're ready, because readiness isn't a feeling anymore. It's a state you live in. That doesn't mean you'll never feel fear, doubt, or fatigue. You will. Everyone does. But when they show up, they don't derail you. They become cues, signals that it's time to lean on the systems you've built, the rhythms you've trained, and the identity you've forged. You act not because it's easy, but because it's who you are now. This is the real freedom, not the absence of challenge, but the absence of internal resistance to meeting those challenges. You no longer need the world to be perfect for you to perform. You carry your conditions with you: portable discipline, portable focus, portable resilience. No matter where you are, the code runs the same. And the longer you live like this, the more your presence changes the environments you enter. People feel the stability in you. They sense that you're not thrown off by chaos, that you don't need to control every variable to stay composed. That steadiness becomes magnetic. It draws opportunities, trust, and influence. Things that can't be forced, only earned. If you keep going, there will be seasons where you're tempted to loosen your standards, to settle because things are good enough. That's when you remember what got you here. It wasn't luck. It wasn't shortcuts. It was the daily choice to act in alignment with the person you decided to be, even when it was inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unrecognized. You can choose to protect that choice every day from now on. To keep writing and rewriting the lines of your code so they match the life you want to live. Not just today, but 10 years from now. To treat each moment, each decision, each conversation as a chance to reinforce the unstoppable version of you. And here's the thing, you've already proven you can do it. The proof is in the fact that you're still here, listening, learning, refining. That hunger, that willingness to build and rebuild, that's what will carry you forward long after the initial spark fades. You don't have to know exactly where this path will take you. You just have to know that you'll walk it with the same commitment you've shown to yourself here. Because the destination isn't what will make you unstoppable. It's the way you travel that will. So keep going. Protect what you've built. Strengthen it. Live it. And as you do, remember that the code you carry isn't just for moments like this. It's for every moment that comes next. Now, take this version of you into the rest of your life, and don't stop until you've seen just how far it can go.